Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMScast. My name is Chris Badgett, and today we have a special guest, Shaun James from Pentester University, and we're going to get into web security, personal security, and how that relates to your online course platform. But before we get into that, Shaun, I just wanted to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your story because you're a cybersecurity expert. So can you kind of tell us about your journey, like where you came from, how you got into cybersecurity,
Sure.
and how you got all the way into teaching others about cybersecurity? And for those of you listening, pen tester stands for penetration testing. And but I guess first tell us what that is, and then tell us the story from the beginning.
Okay. So penetration testing is really just companies trying to hire an ethical hacker to find the holes that the bad guys would use to get in, break in, steal customer information, business, critical information, stuff like that. So that's really all it is. And cybersecurity kind of overwraps that, if you will, to include many things like network security and defensive and offensive security and things like that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, how did you get into this world of cybersecurity? What's your story?
So it's actually a really long story, so I'll try to keep it short. I actually started when I was a kid. So my parents used to get super mad at me when I'd pick up the touch-tone telephone and start dialing pound codes and star codes, writing them into a notebook and figuring out what they did and all the messages. And the phone company would actually call my house and ask what the heck we were doing. When I got old enough to ride my bike down the street, I used to go to a payphone to do it. So I've been doing this stuff since I was a little guy. But what really got me interested in is the love of technology and the fact of being able to legally break into systems and figure out security holes. And it's kind of like a puzzle. So to me, it just made sense that that's what I had to do in my life. So I wasn't always a penetration tester. I went to school. I learned a different trade. I learned automotive. At the same time, after high school, I learned, networking and computers and security and stuff like that to get really in depth with it, get my certifications and so on. So I always had a backup career. Hurt my back working on cars early out. So I just said that, the heck with this. And I went on to, start work for other companies and eventually started my own company and they started subcontracting me. And then eventually I cut out the middleman and went right after the big fish myself. So that's really how I got started in that. And, after you do something for a really long time, you kind of look for another challenge. So what I did was I created a YouTube channel that now has 35,000 subscribers, and I started teaching for free. And that was pretty cool. I got really good feedback from that. So I decided to start an online school and actually teach people how to do it, because the biggest problem is school is not affordable. It's just not. I spent $16,000 for 6 months of school for network security. So a lot of courses are $5,000 and some are free, but I live by the old adage, you get what you pay for. So I decided to start my own affordable school, and here we are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the things I want to highlight, it's not really the topic of this show, but the fact that you were already kind of creating content and you found that you had community on YouTube, that's an awesome way to go about it, because a lot of people kind of start with the tools and they don't have any content yet. They don't have the community. They don't have any traction or momentum. So I just want to commend you on your starting point there. So that's
cool. Thank you.
Well, when I think of, ethical hacking and, getting hired to do that and the economy around that, I mean, I think about banks, wanting to protect their stuff
right.
But who else should be concerned?
Anybody that's online, really. I mean, if you have a computer connected to the internet at some point, you're vulnerable. That's just the way that the world works. That's the internet for you. If you want to be 110% secure, unplug from the internet, stop using it. Really, right. That's what we tell people. So, but everybody really has to worry about that, and specifically online course creators. So, a lot of times you're collecting customer information, student information, things like that. You want to make sure that that stuff is secure. You don't want to have it, vulnerable. Like the Amazon and credit card companies get hacked all the time, and banks and other businesses. And that's just what it is. That's the nature of the beast. So everybody has to worry about it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what, for someone who's this is kind of new information to them, what areas do you focus on for the course creation platform to have increased security? Like, is it just e-commerce related? Is it logging into the back end of WordPress, or where do we need to be concerned?
It's really almost everywhere. I know it's a terrible answer, but it's everywhere. So even if you had a static website, right, that you're posting some information on, for instance, if I was an attacker and you had like a popular website for whatever niche it was or whatever it was, even just a static page, if I were to be able to break into the back end of the FTP server and upload or change your files to include a payload inside of the website, you'll never see it. I'll never modify the text of your website. It looks like a normal website. However, when users go to visit there, I can steal their cookie information, which is used for logins. I can steal information from them. I could take over their computer and use it to attack other computers. So it's really important to have, even website security on very basic static HTML websites.
Absolutely. I think getting hacked, sometimes it's not even a question of if, it's a question of when. One of my first online course websites, a WordPress website, got hacked, and there was some kind of code that somehow got in there, and it was actually kind of smart. If I was logged into the site as a WordPress administrator, I couldn't tell it was there. And even people on computers couldn't tell it was there. But if you were on a mobile phone and you went to my website, it would redirect you to some app, something for sale in the App Store.
Right. So it was just like a clickjacking, if you will, is what we call it. And that's just to take a specific set of users that you want, for instance, in that case, to make app sales or, free downloads for the app so they can make money off the ads. It's just to redirect those users away. So I would make a payload, for instance, for iOS and, for any other cell phone operating system. And then I would redirect users based upon that. Every time you surf a website, your information is given out. What you're using, what version, all that good stuff.
So where do you start? Like, what's the first place to start with? Like, okay, I want more security. Where do I start? Is it with hosting? Is it with other plugins? What do I do?
So what I would start with is the hosting company itself. You obviously want a reputable company. And with that, you want to make sure you're keeping your own backups. You can't always trust the company to actually keep and store your backups. Things happen. Backups get lost all the time. So you want to make sure you choose a good host. For instance, you're using WordPress for the LifterLMS, right? And I use the same thing. So what I wanted was a reliable host, and there's tons of them out there, big name guys. I used to have a hosting company back in 2002. I know a lot of these guys started around the same time I did. So I know where they're at, but the point is that they can't all offer really good security. And so the host I personally use is WP Engine. And I think that, in my research, they're one of the best. They offer good security, backups, live sites. I mean, they do all sorts of good stuff. So the next thing you want to start with there, and this is probably more logic than anything, is not to use a common email that you use every day for regular communications for your site admin email. Make it an email that you don't use anywhere else but specifically for that. And that helps because if I was able to get your email address and I know your website and I want to break into it, the very first thing I'm going to do is pop that into what we call brute forcer, which just really tries username password combinations over and over again until it gets the right one. And I'm going to try a password list. I have one that I created for 1.2 million unique passwords myself. And I would break into your website and then do what I had to do. So don't use your regular email. That's number one. Two, there's a lot of plugins for like WordPress. And I guess this conversation is going to go more towards WordPress because that's what we're all using. For instance, WordFence. WordFence is a really super good plugin for all types of security. It offers firewall, spam scanning, malware scanning. If somebody did break into your website, it scans the site for your users so it could pick up common attacks, things like that. Also, there's a plugin, I can't remember, I think it's made by Huge IT is what it's called, the company. And they make a login redirector. So usually what happens is when you set up a brute force type deal, you would go to the WordPress login. And that's pretty common because it's the same on every single website. And you set your attack up to go to that URL and guess those usernames and passwords. However, the Huge IT thing has a pro version and a free version. Free version works pretty good too, but it really just creates like a pop-up, if you will. So it's harder to attack a pop-up because it's not an actual URL. So that's some of the common things you could do there. And again, the host is key. You should have SSL on your websites if you're collecting any information, even if users are registering for a free account. or logging in or giving you any information whatsoever, you should definitely have SSL. And it's free.
Let me ask you some questions around that.
Sure.
A secure shell certificate, is that what it stands for? What?
Secure socket layer, yeah.
Oh,
SSL.
There we go.
Yep.
What does it actually do? Like what does it do?
So when you communicate on the web, you're sending out packets, and think of a packet as like a pill, right? And inside the pill, you have what's the payload there. It's like the medicine, right? So you have the outer shell of that. So what SSL does is basically the outer shell to the critical information that's inside. And so it encrypts the communication between you and a server. So when you're sending your stuff over, it's encrypted by like 128-bit SSL certificates. And there's a public and private key. I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff that goes on behind the scenes. But really what it does is encrypts the session or the line between you and the website. So any information you send or the website sends back is in that encrypted tunnel or in that pill.
Right. So for example, like your students in your online course website, when they're typing in your username and password, that's communicating with your server, right?
Correct.
So the SSL is like you're actually protecting your students' email addresses and passwords and things like that.
Right, and all their personal information. So like for me, I send out some gifts to my students when they first enroll, depending on what they enroll in and so on and so forth, and I collect their mailing addresses. A lot of people don't put their right mailing addresses, but nonetheless, the users that are serious, that put in their real address, I want to protect that information. I don't want to give that out to anybody that may be eavesdropping, and it doesn't have to be anybody eavesdropping on the website's end. Their computer could be compromised from somewhere else, suspicious download or a crazy email or something. Their computer could be giving up the information, not necessarily our website. So I want to make sure that no matter what, both of us are protected. So we create that encryption.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I've heard of a simpler plugin in WordFence called Limit Login Attempts, which all that does is, WordFence does a lot of things, and I've used it a lot too, but Limit Login Attempts just helps with that brute force situation where somebody can only forget their password like 3 times and they get locked out for like.
Exactly. And what that does is ban it by IP address. So even that said, that's not even really safe anymore because you have things like VPNs and proxies. Tor was an infamous proxy that used to switch your IP address or your proxy fake IP address every so often. So if I was a brute forcer and I'm using Tor to do that, all I got to do is shut Tor off, start it back up, fire the attempts again. And of course, I have a new IP address and I can keep hammering the system. You also don't want to set that threshold too low. So if you set it at like 3, now the user locked out, blocked by their IP address, they can't really just change their IP address. Now there's support tickets and chaos. So you have to find that happy medium of the threshold to set it for a lockout.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I like what you were saying too, where sometimes things are just obvious. Like if I'm going to a website and I'm like, hey, I wonder if that's a WordPress website, I actually just add wp-admin to the end and like, oh, there's the login window. And then WordPress used to create the first user account with the username admin. So, now all I have to guess is the password. So
exactly.
It
was pretty easy.
Yeah. So security is something that keeps evolving.
Sure.
And it's always just worth, looking at. But what about, let's talk about e-commerce a little bit. Help me understand this issue with LifterLMS. If you sell credit card, there's a screen powered by Stripe, a little part of the checkout screen, but Stripe is actually handling the PCI compliance or whatever. Me as the site owner, if on my website and in my Stripe account, I can only ever see the last 4 digits of the credit card number or whatever.
Right.
So, and we're used to that when we call somewhere and they're like, hey, what are the last 4 of your credit card? There's some security checks in place there. But
sure,
if I'm selling accepting credit cards on my website, am I good with Stripe and an SSL certificate? Is there anything else I need to think about there?
No, you're pretty good because Stripe themselves has to self-regulate according to PCI DSS compliancy, like you said. And that's a very strict compliancy. They have to meet it a certain amount of months. I think it's now 3 months, every 3 months, every quarter. But they have to have their own set of security there. First of all, they have to have SSL. That's number 1 primary before they ever get their certificate to be able to do any kind of credit card transactions. 2, when they're storing the user's information, credit cards, so on and so forth, it has to be encrypted. So you have the point-to-point encryption, which is the SSL. And then when it's stored on the server, you have to have security at rest. So there's strong encryption there to encrypt the actual databases where the credit card information is stored. It's not impenetrable. I mean, it happens all the time. You see whatever bank gets hacked, whatever credit card company gets hacked, and the things are leaked to Ashley Madison, the whole nightmare that went down there with all those poor guys that lost their credit cards and their personal information and everything else. It's just a common occurrence, but you're safe as a teacher, as a course provider, because you're offering the best encryption you can from them to you. And then from you to Stripe, that's handled on Stripe's end. Stripe has to create that encryption tunnel. So users really are secure in that way. It's not impossible, like I said, to interrupt that transmission. There are ways to do it, but it's not something that's going to happen every single day.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, also, since I have the expert on the line here, I've heard of like SQL injections or whatever. So anywhere there's like a form, like a comment on a blog post or, a contact form, a hacker can insert malicious code through those areas where they can input stuff sometimes. Like, can you tell us a little bit about how that all works?
So SQL Injections, or SQLI, is basically where whenever you create a website that has any kind of interactivity to it, you click a button, you go to a different link, you fill in a form, all that stuff has to be stored somewhere. And SQL is basically a database where it stores that information. So when code's written improperly, it allows users, or malicious users, I should say, to actually inject malicious code into that to trick the database server to giving up the information to unprivileged users. So when you create a database connection, you're saying this username, this password has access to change, modify, update, whatever tables inside this database, or retrieve that information also. But when I trick it to do it, it's because the code doesn't properly sanitize my input. So I can, like, for instance, if you ever notice, you go into a web page that says like www.somesite.com, question mark, PHP or index.php, question mark, ID equals, and then a number. That's very susceptible sometimes to a simple attack. So if you put an apostrophe there, you can see that it returns an error. And when it returns an error, you can say, okay, this is susceptible to SQL injection. You can go further. It's just, it doesn't properly sanitize that extra character that I put in. So it gives up that information. So with that being said, once I'm able to do that and figure out that there's some errors there, that it's not properly sanitized, I can drop the entire database table. I can get usernames, passwords, credit card numbers, social security numbers, everything. And that's how a lot of these big hacks actually work.
And is that scraping? Is that what that's called? If you let's say you want to get all the emails or credit cards out of something, what's scraping?
Well, scraping is a tool, or sometimes people actually, before there was tools, we used to do it manually, go in and view the source code of a website and do searches for whatever email addresses or, usernames, passwords, things like that. Scraping is basically a tool that goes to the website, does the same thing, opens it up almost in a text editor, if you will, and pulls down any kind of information that you want it to get. So for instance, any email addresses that are listed on a website for support for a lot of websites, for whatever reason, still have directories of employees. I don't know why, with email addresses and telephone numbers and all this good stuff. So if I wanted to, for instance, do a spoofing attack, I'd go scrape the website, get all the email addresses. Now I have the email addresses. I could either try to break into their emails or fake an email to somebody else in the company from somebody else in the company and get them to open a file, and then I'm into their company and that's it, it's over. So a scraper is really just going to the website, pulling the information down, and having that information available to you for whatever use.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about another area that I've always wanted a deeper understanding on, especially with WordPress sites, is where does all that spam come from? I mean, is that really a security thing, or are those bots that just leaving comments that have nothing to do with the blog post? What is that?
Well, so I usually recommend using plugins that would use reCAPTCHA, which is Google's idea of trying to defeat these robots or spam bots. And the comment spam comes from just being somebody smart enough to be able to write code to find a comment section, input the correct fields, and then hit post. Really, every time you hit a button to post a comment, it's just a data packet. That's all it is. It's a post or a get or something like that in the HTTP protocol. And it's pretty simple to actually make those things. I mean, that's why I think that WordPress should just roll out with reCAPTCHA right off the bat.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's so common now.
Yeah,
And with
there's no
comments,
reason to get up to like 500 comments pending in the
right.
queue or fake. I mean, I agree with you that they should just at least have it turned on by default.
Right. And the thing with comment spam is if it's, SQL injections are not the only thing you can do with forms. I can do JavaScript injections, which are called remote code injections. And I can actually upload or post a comment that looks like a normal comment. Hello, everyone. Welcome to whatever. And inside that, hidden is a payload that will steal your cookies, your login information, redirect you, whatever, download a file to your computer, whatever. So it's pretty important to have that too, because there's a lot of people that create those bots that go out and look for vulnerable forums to post that kind of code into. And that's how they create botnets, is basically taking over one computer to take over 100 computers to take over 1,000 computers and so on and so forth.
And that's sort of like the concept of a worm, right? What's a worm?
So a worm basically replicates through a network. And it used to be where it's like a user got something, and say if there's 10 computers on a network, the worm would actually be intelligent enough to try to search out these other computers, see if there's any open shares. Everybody shares files across the network, and replicate itself to those shares and then execute itself. So then it would take over all 10 of those computers and use those 10 computers for whatever it was, distributed computing, compiling code, trying to hack other people. And now that's really turned into botnets, as we all know. We see on the news, the hacker group Anonymous. They're so infamous for DOS attacks or denial of service attacks, and that's how they do it. They don't necessarily just use one tool because it's easily preventable. So they'll use 10,000 computers that they have at their will by one program to command them all to attack something.
Yeah, back in our agency days, we were helping clients who sometimes were suffering from a DDoS attack, which
right.
is like it's a lot of fake traffic, that it's too much traffic and it causes the websites to crash.
Right.
But what causes it? Like, how does that happen, and how are you supposed to fix it?
So like you're talking about like a worm attack or something, or
just like a denial of service, like my site keeps going down, there's all this fake traffic, what do I do?
So there's a great company called Cloudflare, and what they do is actually content filtering, and what they'll do is mitigation of those attacks. So like you said, the attacks work by DDoS, stands for distributed denial of service attack, meaning there's multiple computers all over the world attacking one website, server, what have you. So what Cloudflare does is actually redirect that bad traffic away. So it doesn't really necessarily shut down your website. They have what's called a CDN, which is a content delivery network. So they spread your site around multiple servers. Google and Yahoo and all the big companies have been using that for almost a decade now. And now Cloudflare actually does it for free, pretty much, I think. So that's the only way to really mitigate that. Back in the day, I used to write custom scripts on my servers in the server company to actually deal with that. I would set a threshold to say, if there's 5 connections from the same IP, take that IP address and send it to FBI.gov. Let them go attack FBI.gov and get arrested. Right. So, there was ways to do that, but now it's more efficient. Cloudflare is just awesome. There's other companies like that, like GoDaddy has their own little thing that they do there, but I'm pretty sure they use Cloudflare as their backend anyway. It's all DNS mitigation now.
Gotcha. And we use WP Engine ourselves too for all our sites, and we're really happy with it. And I know there's also if you do get hacked, like what's somebody supposed to do? Like where do they turn to trust? And I can just share in my experience, when I first got hacked, the story I was telling earlier, that's when I became a customer of a company called Securi, and they cleaned up the hack. And then I paid for extended like firewall service and monitoring, and
Sure.
I had a great experience with Securi. But where should people go? Like, how do they know where to go if all of a sudden their site's redirecting, or they're getting weird ads, or things appear to not they might be hacked? What should they do?
Sure. So the very first thing that I would do is shut down the website immediately, because you don't want anybody else getting infected. You certainly don't want to get getting worse, and you definitely don't want to ruin your reputation, especially if you're a popular site. Then what I would do is, again, backups are key. Restore your backup, change your password, because it's possible that they broke your password and that's how they got in. Change your FTP password, which is where you upload your files to. Change your any kind of control panels, backend, admin logins, change all those passwords. Password security is key here. So what I've noticed with LifterLMS is from default, it makes you use a secure password, which I love that. I do.
That's a public service that we do that some people don't like, and that they immediately
awesome.
set it to weak. But We're
No,
trying to
that's
be good
awesome.
citizens of the internet here.
Yeah, and that's awesome because, it doesn't take just your admin account to be hacked. It could be a user's account. It could be anything. Anybody that has any kind of write access on the website. So really what you want to do is shut down the website immediately, change your password to your FTP first, because maybe that's how they got in. They cracked your FTP username and password. Change that password first, change any of your control panel passwords, restore a backup, and figure out where the hack came from. So there's various sites out there. I'm sure you can do a Google search for them that will actually scan your website for malicious code. Again, WordPress engine is pretty good at protecting against that stuff. And also, WordFence is pretty good at protecting that. So maybe you have an outdated plugin. Maybe it was some code that wasn't written correctly and allowed a remote injection or some sort of payload upload or something like that. So very first thing is always keep a current backup. I like to make backups every day. I'm just crazy like that. But just in case something does happen, I'm not a guy that wouldn't get hacked. I'm sure at some point it might happen. Hasn't happened yet, thank God. But it's anybody's vulnerable. I mean, the NSA gets hacked, for God's sake. So
Right.
They have millions of people working to protect their security, and they get hacked by 6-year-old kids in Indonesia. So, no, there's nothing you can do to prevent it. Truly, there's nothing you can do besides not be on the internet. But really, that's the first step I would do, is to make sure and then change your passwords and restore your backup.
That makes sense. And yeah, backups are really important, and some people overlook it, but especially if it's your main business or you've spent a lot of time building it up, you should have a good web hosting company that's doing automated backups.
Right.
You should have a copy locally, like on your computer. I mean, download it or put it on a hard drive or something. And then if you want to get really crazy about it, download it, put it on a hard drive, and then keep it in a different location in case your house burns down. I mean, you can go
really crazy.
But if you're making a lot of money off your platform, you should treat it with insurance policy like that.
Sure. You definitely invest in it. I mean, listen, we don't do $1 million a year in my course. I mean, we're still getting traction here and getting going. But the thing is, I like to invest in any kind of ventures that I have a vested interest in, whether it's financial or time or labor or whatever. And so, I was going back and forth between a cheaper web host, hosting it myself, or somebody that's going to do it for me, and it's just done. If I have a problem, I go, hey man, I got a problem. Can you fix it? Yes or no? And that's it. I don't have to worry about the nuances of, fixing it and worrying about it and all that stuff. So WordPress engine does automatic backups, which I think is awesome, even for the lowest level plan. So you really can't beat that, but backups are definitely key.
Yeah. WP engine is, I think their for one site plan is like $30 a month, which is more than like the $10 a month shared hosting plan starting point that a lot of people start with. But the peace of mind that comes with some of their security measures, backup system, a staging environment for testing stuff, I mean, it's worth it. You'll end up paying eventually for other services or whatever.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the difference between web security and personal security. So where does the internet stop and where does personal security begin? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, so you could have the most secure website in the entire world, where it's password protected, encrypted. I mean, you could have all the bells and whistles that we spoke about and then some, and it still may not be good enough. So here's the thing. Everything comes back to you in the end. You have to have some sort of personal responsibility for your users, security, students, security, what have you. And that starts with your own personal security. So again, there's no way to protect you 110% besides not being on the internet. I know I keep saying that, but that's the truth. That's the reality. The thing is, your personal security is key. So if you're not really, like, Windows is very susceptible to hacks and attacks and viruses and malware and all sorts of bad stuff. If your system's compromised, it doesn't matter how good your website security is. If you log into your website, there's a possibility there's a keylogger which captures your keystrokes on your keyboard on there, and it sends it to the hacker. So now the hacker doesn't have to do anything. They just have to log into your website. And usually you get those kind of infections by downloading, files. I know I used to be, when I was in IT repair, viruses were my key business. I charge $100 per virus removal. It would take me 15 minutes to an hour. And these were repeat customers, like every week. It was like a bad drug habit that these people had. Just, they wanted to download everything, every little pop-up that came download now. Okay, great. Run it. Sure. So, email attachments, that was huge. Oh, so Johnny's sending me a document. Let's open it up. So it was just crazy. And the problem is that that's really considered what we call social engineering, right? So I'm tricking you as a user, whether I'm spoofing email addresses or, sending you questionable information, and you just don't know any better. And I take advantage of the human element, and I trick you into downloading something, clicking on a link, what have you. And now I take hold of your computer, and everything that your computer does from there on out, I take over that. So even SSL is not going to save you in that way, because SSL starts when you actually send the information. So when you're typing it in there, you could be typing into a secure form, but if I have a keylogger in your machine, I'm capturing those keystrokes before they even leave the computer on the website. So again, personal security is key. You have to have a good antivirus. That's first and foremost. There's a lot of free ones out there which are really good. Your firewall on Windows should stay on. You don't want anybody, jacking up your system there. And you should just use some common sense. Don't download everything on the internet. I promise you it'll still be there tomorrow. Yeah. Make sure your email attachments are really coming from the people they say they're going to come from. Don't click on links and emails. It's another common way people get infected with all sorts of good stuff. And that's kind of it. Yeah, you have to just have some logic behind using a computer these days.
Yeah, and the reality is, it's just out there. Like Facebook, you see all the time where we're almost getting comfortable with it as a society. Right. Like, oh hey, ignore all that. My Facebook account got hacked. I'm like, right. Oh, that's why you sent me all these like airline ticket deal sites, some discounts on some Ray-Ban sunglasses, and I haven't heard of you in like 2 years.
Right, exactly.
So we're getting comfortable with it, but if you're going to be on the web, you have to get comfortable with the realities around that, around information and security.
Sure.
And we're not trying to scare anybody, but, talking about like your actual machine, your laptop itself, is important to take that into equation. Like, some of the things that I see that some people who are, the most concerned about security or paranoid about it or whatever, like they put a piece of tape over their camera. So like somebody can actually like hack your camera. Is that right?
Yeah, it actually, I do the same thing. To be honest with you, I turn my camera off in the computer, and I still put a piece of tape over it, because realistically, I don't want anybody seeing what I'm up to in here. So if I'm like typing away and working on something, or if I'm having a conversation, even the microphone inside the keyboard or my microphone here can be turned on, and anybody can be listening to you. So if you're worried about it, turn it off, unplug it, put a piece of tape over it. My microphone, like I said, I'm a little paranoid myself, because I know what can actually be done. So not that I have anything to hide. It's just I'd rather not have the availability for somebody to listen in on a conversation. So for instance, when I'm talking with my wife about bank accounts or bank numbers or something, credit card, I'm on the phone giving somebody a credit card number or something, I don't want anybody hearing that potentially. So it's all due diligence to yourself. You got to have some sort of self-responsibility, not to make people scared, like you said, where, oh my God, hide the laptop underneath the mattress or in the safe or something every night. Yeah. But the point is that try to take care of yourself, because there's no one piece of software or hardware or any kind of security whatsoever that's going to cure the human element. We're vulnerable as people. That's just the way it is. We're very trusting in nature. So people abuse that power, like you said with the Facebook stuff. So like, Tom Jones is on your friends list. Haven't spoken to him in a couple of years, but you see him and you want to follow up with him and, see what's happening in his life. Tom Jones says, oh, see how many people viewed my profile today? Sure. And then it says, big stupid button, log in with your Facebook account. Oh, that's easy. They click the button, and then now they just gave their username and password away. So it's a no-brainer that their account's now used for spamming purposes and try to grow whatever it is that the spammer's after. It's just the way it is. You have to use some due diligence. I always yell at my wife on the tablet, don't click anything on Facebook. Just don't do it. Stay away from my laptop for sure. And whatever you're doing on your stuff, just don't click anything. Don't sign in with anything. Just stop. If you have a question, ask me.
Yeah. And while we're talking about personal security, one of the other things I just wanted to bring up, like if you're kind of doing a security audit of your online course business or whatever, you probably, when you set up your Stripe account or whatever, I recommend treating your business even like a business, even if it's from your laptop, from home or kitchen table or whatever. So you probably set up a bank account for your business, and you connected the Stripe account to your online course business website or bank account. But also like your personal information, like your business name, you don't have to make that your home address. You can get a
PO box or
UPS store box or one of these, whenever you see Suite, whatever, those are like
right.
business mailbox services. So if you want to maintain a degree of privacy, at all levels, there's always like another step up that you can take if you want to take that kind of stuff into account.
Sure. Like, so the thing for me is I teach cybersecurity, right? So a lot of my students they just want to hack something.
Yeah.
So, and a good portion of that sign up want to be jerks too. They probably already know some stuff and they just want to get at me because, my popularity on the internet with the network security and the YouTube channel and everything else. And it's just common ground for guys like me. I mean, a lot of guys in my industry have this happen to them all the time. They do a couple of talks, they do some conferences with other hackers, they're at the conference. And you have somebody that just has it out for you for whatever reason. I hacked a big guy. Everybody used to be after Kevin Mitnick, a good friend of mine, one of the world's most known hackers ever. And that's just the nature of the beast. So like from what you were saying with the PO boxes and stuff like that, keep your personal information guarded. None of my personal information is online. It's just not. I don't even use my real last name. That's how serious you have to be, because there's people when you get to a certain level of whatever it is you're doing, there's people that want to ruin it for you, and they just want to harass you and send crap to your house or just be jerks. So try to treat it as a real business, like you said, and keep everything separate from your personal life, and just make sure that your mailing address is not your house. If you're worried about that, make sure your bank account's a business bank account, and you shouldn't have any problems.
I heard of one more that I just wanted to ask you about while we've got you on the line about
Sure.
personal security, where like if you have a phone, smartphone, or your laptop's in a bag, people can like wear these like devices that literally like pull data from other devices as they walk by you or something like that. Can you tell? So again, we're not trying to scare anybody. I'm just trying to raise some public awareness about security out there.
Sure. So yes, there is, it's referred to commonly as RFID, which is what credit cards use and things like that to give out your information. My X-Stripe readers, things like that. So even Bluetooth-enabled cell phones, everybody's walking around with a smartphone, like you said. I can hack your Bluetooth and take your contacts, anything you have in your phone, anything you saved inside your phone, pictures, emails. The list is really endless. So here I have my old cell phone here. It's just an old HTC. And I've reprogrammed this to actually do the same kinds of things. Here's my new phone. It's an iPhone. Doesn't matter that they're two different operating systems. It just doesn't matter. So if you're walking by and you got Bluetooth on this deal, and I walk by like this, and I crack your Bluetooth key, and I can steal all your information, download to the phone, you never know. So for instance, I live in New York. So if I'm in the city and I'm walking down the street, I just hold this right like I'm looking at a cell phone like every other dummy that's walking down the street, and really I'm collecting everybody's information. It's just the nature of the beast. The technology is a double-edged sword. It's a good thing because we get to do a lot of cool stuff, science and technology and stuff, but it's also a bad thing because everybody puts all their stuff out there. Everybody does. Yeah. Companies, regular people, everybody does it.
Right. Well, tell us about your course, Shaun. Like, who's it for, and like who's it a good fit for, and is this a good career for people? Like what kind of people is it good for? Who are you trying to help, and what's your dent you're putting in the universe with your online course?
Sure. So for me, I offer a different way of teaching than most other people, and that's what I've been told on my YouTube channel and everything like that. So that's why I keep progressing with this idea that I have. It's really for anybody. So if you want to make a career change, I've got a lot of people that were stockbrokers. I've got a lot of people that were bankers, or people that were just factory workers, people that were in the military and have nothing to do, and they come out. They sign up for my courses. I even have people that are in IT that are just looking to change in a different direction and stay in the same relative field that sign up for the courses. And I teach them from complete beginner. I mean, I could teach you, in 30 days or less, how to become able to do a penetration test. So the goal for me is to have more people that are on the good guys side than the bad guys side, because the bad guys are always 10 steps ahead of us, no matter what we do, how smart we are, how many people we are. So the idea is to grow the cybersecurity community. And the problem is that school is very expensive. I've paid $16,000 for 6 months of schooling. And then you have other online courses that are $5,000 for boot camp. And you don't really learn much. They assume that you know a lot already. So I fit somewhere in the middle. And I help people at an affordable fee to be able to progress into a career into cybersecurity. And you don't really have to know anything when you sign up for my courses. So I'm trying to make the world a safer place by putting more good guys out there than bad guys, like I said.
That's awesome. Well, what's the name of the course and your website, and where can people find out more about you if they want to connect with you on YouTube or social media or anything?
Sure. So it's pentesteruniversity.org. That's the website. And we have one course up there right now that I'm in the process of completing to upload the content, which is penetration testing for beginners. And then we'll have an intermediate and an advanced course. And then we're going to have Linux courses and web security courses and all sorts of good stuff up there, continuing on from our old platform. And if anybody wants to reach me, they can go to the website, reach me there. There's a contact us form, a secure contact us form. And my YouTube channel is NetSec now. It's NETSECNOW. And that's where I got 35,000 guys so far up there. And feel free to reach out to me anytime. If you have any questions or anything, just contact me. I'll be happy to help you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Shaun. And I really appreciate you sharing your experience and helping us all level up our game when it comes to security. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the good work on Lifter.